So this is my review of the film Ghost of Mississippi. The movie is about Medgar Evers and his assassination. He was a civil rights leader. So I'm going to start off with my opinion. One of my favorite scenes in the movie was the opening scene, which went through different pictures of the civil rights movement, and then it went into the actual assassination of Medgar Evers, and I just thought that scene was very moving, and it really drew out a lot of emotion because you see how Evers' family reacts and his children come out and his wife and how they all reacted. And then you see Byron De La Beckwith, which is the person who assassinated him. You see him just walk away, and it's just a very moving scene, and you can really see like the tension of the time and how like Beckwith just didn't care about what he had just done. Another one of the scenes that I thought was very filmed very well was the scene during one of the first trials. It was Miss Evers on the stand, and you see her kind of looking out, but she's still talking, and your focus moves from her to Byron De La Beckwith, and he hugs the governor of Mississippi, and you just kind of notice Miss Evers her thoughts just kind of get lost because she notices that the governor is hugging this criminal and is close with this criminal, and that just really drew out a lot of emotion in the way that it was filmed because it draws your focus from Miss Evers giving her testimony to the governor hugging this criminal, and it just really shows the like racism of the time and the tensions and how messed up things were during that time period. Another one of the scenes that I thought was really moving emotionally was the scene where Bobby De Lauder is explaining to his children why he feels he has to keep going with this trial even though bad things are happening to his family. You know, his children are being made fun of and his house is getting threatened with bombs and his family's getting threatened, but he feels that he has to continue fighting for what he believes in and making sure that this trial is that justice gets served where it deserves to be served. And he just explained to his children why he thought it was right, even though their mother was saying it was wrong. But he explained that he just felt that it was wrong for a black person to be killed by a white person and get no type of punishment for that. And I just thought that that was a very eye-opening scene because, you know, in that time period, it wouldn't have been normal for somebody to do something like that. So I thought it was really interesting and it showed, like, it captured the emotion and the conscience of Bobby De Lauder and how he really felt about what he was doing. In terms of casting, I thought Alec Baldwin did a very good job capturing Bobby De Lauder. And I thought James Wood, who played Byron De La Beckwith, did a really good job playing that villain character, and Bobby De Lauder did a really good job playing that hero character. It really gave they really foiled each other well, and they really portrayed the characters who they were portraying very well. I also thought that it was interesting that Medgar Evers' brother was actually in the film. He was the radio host, and I thought that was really cool because you get kind of like that first-hand experience in the movie. All in all, I really liked the film. I thought it was quite predictable, even though going into it, I knew what was going to happen. I knew the outcome of the movie and of the trial. I think even if I hadn't watched it, it still would have been very predictable. It's just kind of set up where, like, you can kind of just tell where the movie's going. It was focused a lot on the trial and on Bobby De Lauder rather than Medgar Evers and his life and legacy, which some people some critics said was wrong, but personally, I don't think that was wrong. I think it still, it brought out those issues of racism and of the injustice that happened in the trial. So I still think it achieved what the movie wanted to achieve. So all in all, I would give it 4 out of 5 stars. So moving on to the historical accuracy. I read an article by the LA Times that talked about how the movie was very Hollywoodized and how filmmakers really softened the events. They kept everything accurate. There were locked juries and messed up evidence, and a biased jury. They talked about all that, they kept all that accurate. They kept the steps of the trial accurate. They kept all of the people accurate, but they really softened the events and made the events less harsh to make the movie appeal to audiences. It also talked about how they Hollywoodized the actual characters themselves and made them more heroic. For example, Bobby Day Lauter, he was the lawyer of the trial, and they really focused in on him, and they really make him seem like a big hero, which he is a hero for what he did, but they really emphasize that and really blow it up in the movie. Another critic talked about how they failed to address Evers' life and his legacy, which, historically, they touch on it a little bit. They touch on it properly and accurately, and they portray how he was assassinated correctly, but they don't focus in on that. Some other people talk about how Whoopi Goldberg, who plays Medgar Evers' wife, how they portrayed her too lightheartedly, and in real life she's more of a strong and very confident woman, and in the movie she's very confident, but they show her as a little bit softer than what she is in interviews and other stuff like that. Another person touched on the fact that the movie is directed by a white person, and they talked about how it couldn't necessarily be 100% accurate because a white person couldn't really identify with that racism and those kind of situations because they have never felt that. So, I think that's something to note, that some things could be off a little bit, and that could be why things are softened. Some of the situations are softened is because, it is directed by a white person, and it's events that were experienced by African Americans. Another thing about it being overly Hollywoodized is that the characters are very stereotypical Southerners. For example, Byron De La Beckwith is a KKK member, which, that's accurate in itself, but he's very cocky, he's extremely racist, he is just that stereotypical white Southern man that everybody kind of thinks of, like a racist old man who hates black people. And that's very played up in the movie. And going along with that, Byron De La Beckwith is kind of your typical Southern man. He, has a wife that's named Dixie, and she leaves him because she doesn't like that he's defending a black person. So, you just kind of have those stereotypical type of Southern things going on. I also talked about how the movie is not very suspenseful due to that. Which there's not suspense because a lot of people know the outcome of the trial, and they keep it accurate to that. So it is historically accurate to how the trial is, but there's no suspense due to them keeping so on point with that. The beginning has a very historically accurate montage of photos and videos and music from the civil rights era, and that's a very impactful and very emotional part of the movie. It's a very good setup for the movie and everything that, you see the build up to the time period of the civil rights movement that Medgar Evers was in. I found actual articles from when the third trial of Byron De La Beckwith happened in the New York Times archives. So I was able to use those to compare to the movie, which was really nice because it was very easy for me to kind of look at those details of the trial that may have been off or may have been correct. So one thing that I noticed was off using those articles was that Byron De La Beckwith rejected the third trial. He didn't want it. He wanted to appeal it. He didn't want anything to do with it. But in the movie, when they go to, the news reporters go to Byron De La Beckwith's house, he's happy about it. He thinks that he's not going to have any consequences just like before, and he's totally fine with the trial. But in the New York Times articles that I read, they talk about how he wanted to reject the trial. One thing that they did get right, and James Wood did an amazing job doing, was talking about how cocky and arrogant and honestly disgusting Byron De La Beckwith was. I mean, he talked about how it was like an honor that he killed Medgar Evers, and he was extremely vocal about it. And they talk about that in the New York Times article. They also are very accurate on the trial count, like the jury count. They talk in the movie about the amount of white people and African American people on the trial, as well as men and women, and that aligns with the New York Times articles that I read. And they also talk about just like his overall attitude throughout the trial, and that was also very accurate, like I said. But there's also part of the record that says that during the actual trial itself, he was not cocky. He was very calm and very quiet. However, in the movie, they show him keeping that cocky attitude. And the attitudes that I was talking about before were his attitudes before the trial and after his first two trials. And then in this article, it talks about how in the third trial, he's very calm and collected and quiet, and that's not how they portrayed him in the movie. Another thing that I noticed was that in the opening scene of the movie where Evers is assassinated, his family is watching John F. Kennedy's speech. And in my research, I found that John F. Kennedy's speech was given the night before Evers was assassinated. So this could just be that they were watching a news story about the speech or something like that. But it could also be wrong. They could have gotten the timeline wrong and shown them watching the speech happening, which wouldn't have been accurate. So, yeah.